I'm going to talk about debouncing in JavaScript. And this is only like 20 lines of code, but it's the most complicated 20 lines of code I've run into yet trying to learn JavaScript. But we'll go slowly, break it down. It took me a while to get it, so I'll try to explain it to you so you don't suffer as much as I did. Let's imagine that we had this input element. And we'll call it input box. Right? And if I control enter, see I got an extra bracket somewhere. Oh. Okay, so we have an input box. And I want this to be a search box. I'm trying to get rid of that. So when I type cat, it'll search for cat. But I don't want to type C and have it search for C, and then A and have it search for CA, and then have T. I just want it to wait till I'm done typing. So how do I do that? I'll show you. That's what debouncing is all about. It's kind of like, hold on, don't execute anything until I'm done with what I'm trying to do. So here's some JavaScript for you. Let's go to the document and get element by ID. And the ID is input box. And then we're going to add an event listener. And we're going to be listening on the key up event. So every time I press a key and it comes back up, it'll fire this event. And I'm going to call a function. So let's just call this function, I don't know, my function. Alright, so far so good. So this input box, every time the key goes up, it's going to call my function. Well, what's my function? Function, my function. We'll just log to, console.log hi. Very good. I'm gonna have to fire up the, we don't really have a console here, so I'm gonna have to remember how to open up the, alright, there we go. Open up Chrome's console. So if I run this now, I should, every time the key goes up, it should log something. C-A-T, so 3. See, it happened 3 times. We don't want it to happen 3 times. We want it to wait until I'm done. So that's no problem. Rather than calling my function, let's just, we're going to use this, but first we have to put in this debouncing thing. So I'm going to call a function called delay, for lack of a better name. And delay, function delay is going to have a variable called timer. Variable called timer equals 0. And I'll tell you what this is all about. But first, I have to add this timeout idea, right? Because I don't want to execute this until I'm done typing. So I want to have this timeout running where every time they press a key, it gets reset. So as long as they keep pressing a key within a certain amount of time, we'll never call my function. So I'm going to return, within this delay, right? Within this delay, I'm going to return an anonymous function. I'm not even going to give it a name. And what this thing does is it clears whatever timeout we happen to have. And the timeout is, we're keeping track of the timeout using this timer. And then we set timer equal to set timeout. And that's when we call my function. And timeout, you need a function to call and a time. So we'll say 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, see, not much code, but it's really kind of tricky, right? Because delay, when we add this event listener, we call delay. Now, every time the key comes up, we don't call delay each time. We call it once. We call it once when we're setting up this event listener. So what does delay do? It actually returns this. This is what gets invoked or called or whatever when the key comes up. Not delay. Delay just sets this up. This gets called. So let's run it and see if I typed it in correctly. I'm going to start it up by saying Control Enter. And now as long as I keep typing, it shouldn't log anything. But when I stop for a second, see, it just logs something. It logged high. I'll change this around. And I'll restart it. I'll even clear this off. So watch, as long as I'm typing, this gets called. Clear the timeout and then set it. But when I stop for a second, boom, I was delayed. This timer is an ID that the set timeout uses. That's why I can use it here to clear it out. Clear out what? Clear out that ID, that timer. This is the ID for the timer to clear out, and then set it again. Now you're asking yourself, that's great, this is what's being called when the event is fired, but timer isn't part of this, right? We declared it up here, but it's being used down here. So how is that possible? Well, that's something called closure. That's the inner function can make use of the outer function's variables even after the outer function is gone, right? Delay runs once. Delay runs once, assigns this function to the event, and then it's gone. But we can still use the timer. It's crazy, but that's some good JavaScript for you. Now, we don't want to log I was delayed. We actually want to log the event. We want to log what was typed in, which you would think would be this dot value, right? That's what was this top value. So let's find out. I'm going to save that and rerun it. And we wait a second, and it's undefined. Why is it undefined? This is where the issue of scope comes in. Let's add a few console.logs, and we'll look at what the scope is at each step of the way. So when we first call, right, when we're in the function, and then when we call my function. So when we first call it, it's probably going to be window, right? And when the function's running, because this is an event, it's going to be the input box. But what is this? What is the context when we're in my function? I'm going to clear it, restart it, and we'll answer that mystery. So see, this first console said you're in the window. Now I'm going to start typing, and it should pop up with input box, input box, input box. Now I'm going to stop. And look, we're in the window. This is the window. It's not the input box, so we would hope to have the input box value, but we don't. So how can we make this the same as this in this function here? We want this, not this. What we can do is we can bind. We can say, when you call this function, use this, not the context that you were originally created in. Whew, that's some good stuff, right? Let's restart it. So window, now I'm going to type, it's going to say input box, but when I stop, it should give us the value. And there it is. Because we had to say your context isn't the context that you're created in, rather we're going to bind you to the context down here. So yeah, that's 16 lines of code, but we learned about event handling and closure and how context could context can screw you up, and we even learned about debouncing. I think that's a pretty full and complete lesson right there.